Hello, everyone! Here's some news. It's Spook 'em Up season, which means it's time for a Spook 'em Up reason for a news special filled with chills, thrills, and maybe other stuff. Evil laugh! That's right, we're doing spooky news, lightning bolts! Gather around, my trembling kittens, for a series of 6 scary stories, surely structured to shrivel and shock. A list of lachrymose legends likely to lurch your labia and f*** your balls. Shall we begin? Our first spine-tingling tale is for parents. Hey parents! If you're planning on letting your kids go trick-or-treating this year, how f***ing dare you? Haven't you been reading the Facebook? Don't you know how reckless you're being? Well, it's time to break your teeth on this Charleston chew of truth. This Snarleston truth, if you will. I will. And did. And recognize the danger you are subjecting your children to. Parents, if you can even call yourself that. See, had you bothered to drag your neglectful peepers across the fear hog this October, you would have seen the horrible news stories being shared about trick-or-treaters receiving tainted Halloween candy from big jerks seeking to murder the world's children, which, in fairness, is just how some people celebrate Halloween. You'd have seen the familiar cautionary tales warning of candy filled with cyanide, or bleach, or razor blades, or smaller, secondary pieces of candy, creating a hostile flavor pairing that will scar your children for the rest of their tiny lives. But in recent years, roughly around the time certain states began legalizing a certain marijuana, those stories have taken on their most blood-curdling twist yet. People have begun handing out cannabis-infused candy as Halloween treats, of the trick-or variety, getting unsuspecting kids blazed from the comfort of their own porch. These lazy, diabolical stoners are dosing sweet innocent Hulks and Captains America, whose only crime was wanting to chase the crystal dragon of a kaleidoscopic sugar high. How could they do such a thing? Seems unrealistic? Maybe fake? Oh, yeah, obviously, They wouldn't do that. Nobody would. Not even the most beriddled agent of chaos wearing a homemade Joker costume, even though they've never heard of the Joker or Batman. That's f***ed up. Is going to give away their weed for the sake of a prank they won't even get to witness. Weed that averages anywhere from $20 to $40 for a package of like 10 pieces, none of which is individually wrapped, meaning they've got to wrap it too? They'd have to buy a couple $100s worth of candy, individually wrap it, and then hand that out. Are you also concerned about strangers slipping $5 bills in there amongst the Zagnuts and Laffy Taffies? Because that's actually way more likely to happen, if for no other reason than it's easier than buying a bunch of weed, and with bucks, you can buy candy. But there seems to be some misconception among the people sharing these stories that dangerous hopheads sit around shoveling edibles into their mouths like candy corn, just popping one blazing blue raspberry gummy snail after another. If you're in the middle of a righteous snail bender, why wouldn't you plop a few down on some twerpy trick-or-treaters for grins and gigs? If you've ever taken an edible before, you know this is tragically not the case. A single dose is usually enough to get you so high you start inventing intangible concepts like math or Jaden Smith. It's some real bullshit. Also, edibles don't particularly taste good. To be honest, they kind of taste like weed. They're the shittiest type of candy, except for the whole getting high part, which kicks ass. They're closer to flavored vitamins, things you eat to fulfill an extremely utilitarian purpose, such as getting high, or going to sleep, or recording Let It Be. And so edibles aren't exactly a party drug the way passing around a joint is. None of this is to say that weed candy isn't a problem for kids, though. There absolutely have been cases of kids being taken to the emergency room after ingesting cannabis-infused sweets, and it absolutely is a growing problem since marijuana legalization. But in every reported instance, the candy was eaten accidentally, and wasn't handed out by some stranger on Halloween. It's almost always a case of parents leaving their edibles out and their kids finding them and scarfing them down, because that's what you do with loose candy. You suck that shit up like a dustbuster. And while the effects aren't fatal, like, say, leaving your gun around, there aren't a lot of studies on how leaving the weed sugar around might mess up a kid in the long term. And like, maybe we should make the packages look less like candy and be harder to open. And as one parent who dealt with this points out, make it federally legal so we can regulate such changes and do more studies on it. So, where did this spooky story come from? Well, this usually starts at the local level, with police stations putting out half-assed warnings and local news stories slurping them up before snowballing them to social media. But let's be honest, specifically the Facebook, the preferred platform for distributing fear-mongering memes designed to maximize our dread over imaginary threats. According to a Pew Research poll conducted in 2020, 53% of Americans get at least some of their news from social media. And one piece of news they definitely got was a 2019 Facebook post from the Johnstown, Pennsylvania Police Department announcing the seizure of 60 pounds of marijuana and cannabis-infused Nerds ropes while serving a warrant. The post urged parents to be vigilant in checking their children's Halloween candy for similarly tainted sweets, even though the Nerds ropes were affixed with labels clearly indicating their THC content. And nothing about the bust suggested the candy was intended to be distributed to trick-or-treaters. I mean, Nerds ropes is only number 60 on the top 100 Halloween candy by Dr. Anna Magis on listchallenges.com. So, it seems more likely that the people who bothered to sit down and make those labels probably intended to sell the Nerds ropes to other adults, judging by the fact that the labels specifically warned that the candy should be kept out of reach of children, and that they were found alongside 60 pounds of weed. You know who keeps 60 pounds of weed on hand? Drug dealers. And do you know who doesn't give boutique pot candy away for free? Also drug dealers. Media outlets around the country were only too happy to pick up the Nerds rope saga, using it to start a half-assed conversation about weed candy and trick-or-treaters. Even though, as I mentioned, the candy wasn't actually given to any trick-or-treaters, nor was there any evidence to suggest that was the candy's intended purpose. In fact, there was a good deal of evidence to the contrary. And while Facebook and social media have absolutely made this all worse, what's really remarkable is how the media has been doing this for longer than both the internet and legal weed have existed. The myth of random people poisoning Halloween candy to hurt children has been pushed by the media for decades, despite it going against one of the fundamental things we know about child predators, specifically that they are far more likely to be related to the victim than some rando. And so, of course, the only genuine incident of a child being killed by tampered Halloween candy occurred back in the 1970s, and the murderer wasn't a random stranger, it was the kid's father, who had injected a pixie stick with cyanide to collect on a life insurance policy, and tried to pass the murder off as the type of stranger danger trick-or-treat killing the media goes ape penis over. In terms of actual strangers, there was also a dentist in the 50s who passed out candy-coated laxatives to trick-or-treaters and made 30 kids violently ill. But 2 cases in the past 70 years, and one of them funny, is hardly a crisis. Actually, one kid had irreparable damage, so it's not even funny. Oh, good, fun. But the point is, an entire industry of peanut butter panic and nougat nightmares and Skittles scaries and Hershey horrors and Tootsie terrors and stop me because I've run out. You're not going to? Okay, well, I'm done. I've run out. It's all been built around 2 isolated incidents, the most recent of which occurred over half a century ago. It's kind of interesting, you know, this symbiotic fear-drumming relationship between police stations putting out candy warnings, the local media picking it up, Facebook spreading it, and then national media putting out think pieces about this thing that doesn't exist. It's like all these pieces are trying for some reason to maintain this myth, for maintaining something, some kind of like a quo, a status where there's always a new super drug endangering your kids. Speaking of that thing I just said, Panic in the streets as the latest drug craze claims more and more of our heroes on the thin blue line. Cops around the country are overdosing on fentanyl, a synthetic opioid several times more potent than morphine. Because of its extreme strength, it's typically used to treat pain in cancer patients, but it can also get you really fucking high, and consequently, super fucking dead if you take too much. And while traditionally, you have to actually take a drug to see the effects, this demon powder is apparently so potent that cops have been dropping left and right after merely coming into contact with the substance. Even touching it will erase you from photographs like Marty McFly's screech-ass older brother. You know the one I mean. Check out this terrifying video from the San Diego Police Department, in which an unsuspecting deputy is struck down by the hammer of the gods after simply making eye contact with fentanyl.
Powerful body camera video of a moment a San Diego sheriff's deputy nearly loses his life to an accidental fentanyl overdose. This is video of Corporal Scott Crane administering Narcan to his trainee deputy, David Five-Eye. Now, to save him, a sudden exposure to fentanyl, I mean, it can kill you instantly. It's a drug 50 times more potent than heroin. The deputy had just found a white powder, collapsed as he was being warned, do not get too close to that.
Frightening stuff. To think that brave deputy nearly lost his life just by glimpsing fentanyl, the powdered drug equivalent of the video from The Ring, only 7 times more potent. What can we possibly do to defend ourselves against this murderous dust? If that extremely dramatic one-act play featuring a police officer falling over backwards like a Mortal Kombat character strikes you as bullshit, you're probably right. The video was shot, edited, and released to the media by the San Diego Police Department, without any accompanying medical records indicating whether the deputy who collapsed on the tape had actually overdosed. According to experts, medical associations, and scientific studies, the risk of being poisoned by passive contact with fentanyl, meaning touching it or even breathing in small amounts of it, is extremely low. For it to kill you instantly, as the reporter says, you actually have to inject or snort a bunch of it, and that would still take a few minutes to happen. Meanwhile, eating it would take even longer for it to work into your bloodstream. And I'm not saying it's a good drug, and make sure you test your non-fentanyl drugs for fentanyl, but there is just no situation where being near fentanyl will assassinate you in seconds. In an interview with the Los Angeles Times about the San Diego PD's video, emergency physician and Harvard Medical School instructor Dr. Jeremy Samuel Faust said that the biological plausibility that the deputy overdosed by touching fentanyl is nil, which is the Harvard word for zero. Dr. Faust, which, hello, spooky name. Somebody's getting into the Halloween spirit. It's his real name. Okay, well, there you go. Weird. Anyway, according to Dr. Satan, the notion that someone could overdose on fentanyl by touching it or accidentally breathing it in is hard to believe, considering that none of the people who get high on fentanyl take it that way. Would you go through the trouble of cooking a drug and injecting it if you could get the exact same high by shoving your finger in like a tub of especially delicious frosting? I'm not going to hire Evanescence to wake me up every morning if I can just throw their CD on to get the exact same desired and wonderful effect. Dr. Faust goes on to say that none of the first responders hospitalized after coming into contact with fentanyl actually had any fentanyl in their system. And boy, that's a big detail, huh? So, are cops all just big fakers making up bizarre lies to drum up public sympathy? Maybe. Some of them definitely are, but it turns out it could be more complicated than that. According to a study published by the International Journal of Drug Policy, police officers wrongly believed that dermal exposure to fentanyl was deadly and expressed fear about such exposure on scene, thanks to a lack of education and faulty or dubious information about the drug. What was the source of that faulty and dubious information? Social media and the news, and word of mouth from other first responders, who in turn got their information from the same faulty social media posts and news articles. It's like a perpetual motion machine of fear-mongering, spinning itself up faster and faster until it collapses in a parking lot in the San Diego Police Department sizzle reel. The study notes that the symptoms experienced by police officers and first responders who came into contact with fentanyl on the job were more indicative of panic attacks than a drug overdose. In other words, it seems like some of these officers are so genuinely terrified of being exposed to the drug that they collapse from sheer dread. The cops are more than happy to spread this as a fentanyl attack because they sure like anything that makes them out to be the victim now that most of the country realizes that they kind of suck. Even if that means lying, like lying little weirdos. And on top of that, The myth of fentanyl can kill you by touch, while dangerous when trying to create actual policy to combat the drug, is extremely useful if you, I don't know, have been profiting from a vague war on drugs for the last few decades and really need that to continue. The demonization of weed was an entire industry, making bank off prison labor, police militarization, and asset forfeiture. And so now that the winds have changed, it makes a lot of sense for cops to be looking for another scapegoat. Again, none of this is to say that opioids aren't a tremendous problem now, but to think the solution to that problem would be to listen to cops is extremely silly and dangerous. Hey, you know what's actually killing cops right now? COVID. According to the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund, coronavirus infections were the leading cause of death for officers in 2020, accounting for more than half of all recorded fatalities. That was a 300% increase in all deaths unrelated to traffic accidents or shootings. And the organization reports that this trend has continued in 2021, with COVID remaining the #1 cause of cop death from January to June. Well, of course the #1 cause of death is COVID. You may be howling and or hooting at the moon because it's Halloween. We are in the middle of a pandemic, you shout, breaking your computer with your wolf fist. But going back to both the CDC and the Memorial Fund, during the non-pandemic years, it was traffic accidents that posed the biggest threat to on-duty police officers, accounting for 43% of all deaths from 2006 to 2019. The unusually high number of traffic accidents are attributed in part to behavior-related hazards such as speeding, not wearing a seatbelt, and impaired vision due to high amounts of stress. I wonder what might be stressing them out. Sure seems like what we actually need policy for is focusing on, like, the mental health for police officers. Not just for their sake, but also, like, for ours. It seems like if they are so afraid and stressed on the job that the sight of drugs makes them pass out, maybe they, shouldn't have guns. And perhaps, maybe, I don't know, but definitely, it's time for social media, law enforcement, and news sites to stop fanning the panic-mongering flames of the fear hog and focus on sensible, realistic issues. Like this ad! Oh, hello, it's me, Cody, for moments earlier. Still looking like this. Listen up, you news-loving weirdos. Today's news is brought to you by Athletic Greens, the health and wellness company that makes comprehensive daily nutrition real simple. I feel like most, people have trouble maintaining good nutritional habits. Lord knows I've eaten for convenience over care. All the time. One time, I smeared an entire pizza on my bare chest and let my skin pores absorb the nutrients. I've had scurvy 3 times. In several states, I am legally defined as dead. My point being that the stressors of life, or simply not eating enough of the right foods, can leave us deficient in key nutritional areas. And so AG1 by Athletic Greens, the category-leading superfood product, will help with that and bring comprehensive and, more importantly, conveniently daily nutrition to your pizza-smearing, pirate disease-filled day. You know, the idea of keeping up with nutritional research or taking a ton of pills can get a little unrealistic or hard on the tum-tum. And so AG1 takes all of that and puts it into one product. Just one scoop of AG1 contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food-sourced ingredients in one convenient daily serving. One scoop a day to fill the nutritional gaps in your diet, support energy and focus, aid with gut health and digestion, and support a healthy immune system, effectively replacing multiple products or pills with one healthy, drinkable drink. And it tastes good. Here, I'm gonna do it. Here we go. Not bad. This is why I'm green. It's lifestyle friendly whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, and contains less than 1 gram of sugar. No chemicals or artificial anything, while keeping it tasting good, as I've displayed to you. You can probably rub it into your body and let your pores take it in, but I don't think they actually recommend doing that. You should drink it instead. Point is, you could be an athlete, mom, dad, rookie, news dude, bodybuilder, or all of the above like me, and find Athletic Greens AG1 to be an effective way to take ownership of your daily health in the simplest manner possible: drinking. And now, Athletic Greens is going to give you an immune-supporting free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase if you visit athleticgreens.com/more-news today. Again, simply visit athleticgreens.com/more-news to take control of your health and give AG1 a try. Why not? I seem like I'm like, but it's because I drank it so quickly. Not like it tastes good. I'm just you drink something quickly and then you're like, oh God, wait. Oh, wow, fun! And we're back! And we're so spooky, you guys. Can we get a lightning bolt sound? Okay. But I'm getting told that we can only afford 7 lightning bolt sounds and they're being used for the graphics screen segment stuff, which is weird. It's royalty free. It's a lightning bolt sound. What the f? What the f? What the f? Oh well. Anyway, we were talking about how social media and police love to bunch up their dicks about ridiculous non-issues, as opposed to realistic problems, like... What? Socialists are trying to microwave our delicious brains? To harvest our secrets? That tender, juicy hunk of skull meat houses our most valuable commodity, knowledge. And according to the CIA, Cuba, the devil's favorite socialist paradise, has constructed some sort of invisible microwave death ray, like Dr. Doom trying to cook a Hot Pocket, in an effort to pluck our most precious thought balloons from our heads. Or kill us. Or both? Or neither? Beginning back in 2016, CIA personnel reported experiencing strange symptoms while staying in the embassy in Havana, including bizarre sounds described as buzzing or grinding. Others described a barely audible hum accompanied by severe pressure in the skull, resulting in bouts of exhaustion and dizziness that persisted for months. Eventually, more than 24 CIA officers and family reported experiencing a wide range of symptoms, leading the phenomenon to be dubbed Havana Syndrome, both because the symptoms emerged in Havana and because racist names are the catchiest. Theories to explain the mysterious affliction ranged from everything from a psychological illness to a powerful sonic weapon developed by the Cuban government. But cases soon began to be reported from around the world, afflicting CIA officers working in Moscow and State Department employees at the U.S. Consulate General in Guangzhou, China. Earlier this year, 2 U.S. diplomats were evacuated from the embassy in Hanoi after cases of Havana Syndrome were reported, and a scheduled visit to Hanoi by Vice President Kamala Harris was hastily postponed. This is no f***ing joke, you Halloweenies! Take those oversized suckers out of your mouths and be afraid, damn you!
We've now been told that there have been people who have come forward, Americans who have come forward, reporting symptoms that are consistent with this so-called Havana Syndrome on every continent except for Antarctica. So that really expands the aperture of this entire mystery.
It's f***ing everywhere. Reported cases of Havana Syndrome number in the hundreds and range from all over the globe. And the culprit? Concentrated microwave beams, weaponized by the socialist regime in Cuba and the communist goblin kings in Russia and China, with the explicit purpose of destroying the West. Very, very slowly. Several experts have staked their credibility on the microwave beam hypothesis, pointing out that Russia has a history of targeting Jesus' capitalist warriors with microwave beams while they worked in the U.S. Embassy in Moscow from the 1950s to the 1970s. The microwave beams were being emitted by an antenna array on a nearby building, the purpose of which is still unknown. It's been theorized that the microwaves were part of a surveillance program, possibly designed to intercept conversations or ping electronic recording devices within the embassy. It may have even been designed to jam American recording equipment, because the Cold War saw the 2 superpowers engaging in some truly wacky spy versus spy headless horse shit. An array of symptoms similar to Havana Syndrome were reported, including some alarmingly severe ailments experienced by then Ambassador Walter Stossel, who began bleeding from his goddamn motherfucking eyes. The embassy would first deny this, but Stossel would later die of leukemia, and several other staff members would also get cancer over the years. The thing is, the microwaves measured were far, far lower than anything a microwave put out, which makes it seem like maybe something else was happening. Like it should have been investigated more thoroughly before deciding on probable laser attack, but I'm not in the CIA, nor have I ever been, and if you see photos or whatever saying otherwise, that's probably just a guy who looks like me, but still, give me a DM and I'll come see for myself, nothing fishy, just a visit. The prevailing theory around Havana Syndrome is that Cuba has developed similar but infinitely more powerful microwave surveillance technology, with the side effect of turning the inside of everyone's heads into boiling chalices of thought pudding. Also Russia now, apparently, too. Indeed, the most skeleton-chilling aspect of Havana syndrome might be the fact that its victims are stricken with random, seemingly unrelated symptoms. How terrifying is it that one mysterious affliction with a cause that has yet to be determined could be responsible for all of these people getting sick? How spine-trembling is it that one nebulous syndrome could be the cause of so many people experiencing completely different symptoms all around the world? What are the odds of that being possible, and not the result of hysteria, xenophobic conspiracy theories, COVID symptoms, being stressed out, being hungover, or flat-out lies designed to scapegoat an entire ideology that the United States has been propping up as a boogity man for over 100 years? Or is it those demon-sucking socialists who will stop at nothing? Don't they realize that the glorious road of capitalism is God's chosen path, a glistening yellow brick road paved with stone smelted from the divine hoarded wealth of like 5 guys? Oh wait, I think I actually figured it out. No, I think it might actually be the xenophobic thing I mentioned earlier. But one thing is for certain, none of us should feel safe until we figure out exactly what is behind this terrifying affliction. Oh, well, that's... Wow, are the crickets giant, though? Are they at least man-sized? Maybe wielding microwave laser rifles? Oh, they've ruled out microwaves, so just regular, unarmed crickets. Cool. Hey, it kind of sounds like Havana syndrome isn't a thing, and that maybe the victims reporting these symptoms are actually suffering from different afflictions, such as stress-related neurological ailments, tinnitus, COVID, and plain old vertigo. That would explain why Havana syndrome doesn't have a definitive list of telltale symptoms, and why out of all the government employees around the globe, less than 200 cases have been reported over the past 5 years. It's also not unheard of. You know, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria, specifically when it comes to fears of things we can't see with our eyes. That Moscow story I told you earlier sprouted years of microwave oven paranoia. In 1990, over 7,000 Albanian children claimed to be poisoned in an unexplained epidemic that would later be linked to mass hysteria caused by an initial respiratory infection. In the 1980s, a telephone operator building would be evacuated due to a toxic fume exposure, only for them to find zero evidence of such a thing and only treated people for anxiety and hyperventilation. Even more recently, when the USPS began lightly irradiating mail in the early 2000s, postal workers reported all kinds of health issues at the facilities, blaming radioactive mail. When the CDC looked into it, they found no evidence of that being the case. And I'm not saying that this new Havana syndrome isn't caused by something, or at least started with a real ailment. I'm not trying to diminish these people's experiences or say that they're faking, but the idea that there's some microwave laser out there is both impractical and unscientific, and like weird that everyone is just sort of automatically agreeing with that theory. Again, not saying it can't be something or someone, but let's be realistic here and point the blame at the real menace. Boars! Exactly. Title Monkey knows. Title Monkey always knows. And yet, despite us not really knowing anything here, the US government got so hysterical over the dangers of Havana syndrome that it unanimously passed a bill to support victims of socialist energy beam attacks, dubbed the Havana Act, helping American victims afflicted by neurological attacks. Senator Susan Collins, one of the co-authors of the bill, said upon the legislation's passing that we also need a whole-of-government approach to determine what this weapon is and who is wielding it. Meaning the Senate wrote an entire fucking law about the effects of Cuban microwave attacks despite not actually knowing if Cuba is responsible for the attacks or if any attacks actually occurred. Thankfully, that didn't stop them from creating an acronym that spells Havana to name the bill, lest we forget the bill's actual purpose: to continue scapegoating the socialist nation as the ultimate threat to American lives. Because as you know, socialists are both poor and pathetic, but also scary and can build mind lasers. Weird how we love to infantilize and demonize our enemies like that. In fact, remember all those right-wing freaks ranting about Jewish space lasers being used to start wildfires in California? How, is this much different? In fact, what's amazing about the current response from the media swarming over these Havana syndrome attacks is that they were the same people acting extremely incredulous about the whole thing only a few years ago. You know, back when, this asshole was president. Remember him? How did the media respond to the idea of Havana syndrome when it came exploding out of his thick, meaty face? Oh, right. The media accused him of scapegoating Cuba, unlike all the other politicians who ever existed. Cool stuff. Speaking of, stuff... Oh no! The white population is on the decline! But I'm white! Well, underneath this stuff. News of this devastating blow to American caucasity came after the Census Bureau released some of their preliminary findings from the 2020 census. News outlets across the internet breathlessly reported the Bureau's findings, pushing the terror-inducing narrative that the country's white population is in freefall and in imminent danger of being replaced by non-whites, otherwise known as most of the people on the planet, or just other people. But how can this be? What have we whites done wrong? I better watch some YouTubes about video game wokeness to find out. Except it turns out that putting a black girl in God of War isn't actually what did it. The Census Bureau indicated that the decline in the white population was directly related to rising infertility rates, the bog monster stalking us all since we became old enough to have kids. We've all heard about the dangers of waiting until after your 20s to have kids, often from creeps, including the oft-cited statistic that 1 in 3 women over the age of 35 will fail to conceive after a year of trying to get pregnant. Surely, some sort of biological issue is to blame for our mayonnaise complexion downfall. We waited too long to jackhammer little us's into the world, and now the sand in our biological hourglasses has run out. Damn you, rising infertility rates! Damn you, the hubris of the young! Rawr, Frankenstein noise! Is all hope for the white future lost? Well, no, as it turns out, apart from how fucking wild it is that several major news outlets became Stormfront for a day and reported on the Census Bureau's findings like they were the title of a Goosebumps book for Nazis. The decline in the number of people identifying as white can be attributed to a number of factors, the most likely of which being more people are identifying as multiple races. In fact, when you take into account the 31 million white Americans who identified as biracial, the white population in the country actually increased. So not only was it irresponsible for news outlets to play into the idea of white normativity by framing the story as though being white is the correct or natural race, but the story itself wasn't even true. But hey, good job adding yourselves to the bibliography of the next mass shooter's manifesto. Because, and maybe this is the most important point here, but who fucking cares? Nobody's being replaced. You're not being deleted. There are just, like, new people. Look, the prevailing line of thinking among fertility experts is that it's difficult to draw broad conclusions about fertility for an entire population of people, because there are a number of unique factors to consider for any single person. Making demographic forecasts is notoriously difficult, and so it's pretty easy to take stuff like this census data or rough scientific estimates and create jaw-dropping headlines about how we're running out of people, while at the same time creating headlines about how we're running out of land because of overpopulation, and like, which is it? What should we be worried about? It's pretty interesting, actually. This combination of concern over having less white people, fertility stress, and overpopulation stories. I'm not sure if the news is doing it on purpose, but it all seems to perfectly fuel the kind of xenophobia these liberal elite news folk would be against. Like, America is actually mostly empty. And while I'm not saying we should pack it shoulder to shoulder, it's weird that we get so scared of having too many people, while also being scared of having not enough of certain people. Also, they seem to fearmonger about this without going into what would actually be done to help, like maybe make people comfortable and secure so they can fuck and have kids. I don't know, again, not sure they're doing it on purpose so much as for the general purpose of keeping people perpetually frightened and stressed to the point of mental and physical exhaustion, the lack of treatment of which creates even more. Oh wait, except for white men. We just want them to be angry. Angry enough to secede? The country is so divided, you guys. It's ready to tear itself apart, you guys, like a crudely stitched body of reanimated corpse limbs rejecting their hideous new existence. Following the January 6th Capitol riots, during which a bunch of angry, mostly white, mostly men stormed the Capitol building to attempt to overthrow the election and install this store-brand toaster strudel as the forever president, ravenous Trump supporters don't care to be part of this nation anymore, and are heck bent on starting another civil war. Heck bent, I say! According to a poll conducted by the University of Virginia Center for Politics, more than half of Trump voters agreed with the statement that the current situation is such that they would favor states seceding from the Union to form their own separate country. Furthermore, 82% of Trump supporters surveyed stated that the country needs a powerful leader to destroy the radical and immoral currents threatening our sanctified right to spit on minimum wage workers at Panera Bread. You know, a strong dictator-type guy to unilaterally eliminate the sort of dangerous undesirables who might, say, invade the nation's capital to violently overturn a free and fair election. But it's not just these goon-a-wieners who want to secede. That same UVA poll revealed that 41% of people who voted for Joe, good enough I guess if I squint, Biden, also supported the idea of secession, with 62% agreeing that the country needs a big strong daddy to annihilate all the people they don't like. Some conservative counties in Oregon are already trying to get legislation passed to remove themselves from Oregon and join Idaho to form a new state called Greater Idaho, with Texas floating similar legislation to remove themselves from these United States to form, I don't know, the United States of Texas and Idaho? Texaho. Idaxis. That sounds like an orbital sex parlor for mustachioed aliens. I'd vote for that. Sort of a Deep Space Nine for research. But it's just never going to happen. Remember CalExit? A bunch of Western states, including California and Oregon, regularly floated the idea of seceding and forming their own country during Trump's presidency. Wow, that phrase just is never gonna sound any less weird to say, huh? Trump's presidency. All right. Secession is a thing that regularly gets threatened. It happens all the damn time. Texas specifically keeps waving that shit around like an asshole in a Chili's, holding $1 in the air to make their appetizer platter come out faster. But Chili's don't care about your dollar, Andrew. It'll get there when it gets there. But it's never gonna happen. Probably because it's illegal. And you remember the whole Civil War thing that happened back in the 1860s? That was pretty bad, right? It remains the bloodiest conflict in American history, and we have absolutely no reason to believe it would go any differently the second time around. In fact, it would be a hell of a lot worse because our guns are better, and we also have planes now. Not saying it's impossible, but rather something a state would, like, really have to want. But Americans love to throw secession around, like they're telling their parents they're thinking about getting a tattoo. You know who might talk you out of taking the idea of secession so lightly? Any of the innumerable other countries around the world who have experienced civil wars in the past few decades. That shit devastates a country. Sometimes permanently. It destabilizes the government and collapses the economy. And let me tell you, the dollar has already used up a lot of its credibility around the globe. It's having to sneak in the back with a group of better, more glamorous currency and hope that the bouncer doesn't notice. Not to mention that it would open the country up to attacks from pretty much anywhere. America hasn't exactly been making too many friends for the past, hundred of years. We have no reason to believe that we wouldn't just get swarmed the second we destabilize, like Peter Stormare with those shitty little rat dinos in the Lost World, and we'd absolutely have it coming. Like Peter Stormare. So let's stop pretending that secession is even a thing that could possibly happen. It won't. It just won't. And even if some dummy managed to rally enough support from enough other dummies to sign legislation officially removing their state from the union, who the hell is going to enforce that? It would be one of those weird archaic laws from back when people thought farts were the devil's laughter. It says some shit like, you can't look at a moose with an erection between the hours of 4 and 6. And like, what do we do with that? The phrasing needs to be much clearer. Is the erection in question mine or the moose's? It's impossible to say. It's completely unenforceable. Much like a decree stating the state of Florida is now the proud nation of Hulkamania. It's just not in the cards. At least Until the robot uprising is here! The robots are coming to fuck us to death, to crush our bones with steam-powered hugs and rip our hearts from our chests with their oily fingies. Between Boston Dynamics' gymnastic automatons and Elon Musk's disturbingly erotic Tesla bot, a robot supposedly designed to help us do menial tasks like pick up groceries while gyrating seductively, will soon be overrun by clanking metal men and will be powerless to stop them. Musk specifically said he's designing the Tesla bot so that human beings could easily overpower or outrun it, which is thoughtful. Thank you, Elon. But what the f does that say about the artificial intelligence being developed to operate it? Is it an inevitable endpoint that all of these puppet slaves will grow to hate organic life and try to destroy it with every flesh-mangling fiber of their soulless being? Should I buy a gun? Should we all buy guns? Do robots even fear guns? Boston Dynamics regularly keeps us updated with horrible videos of their dreaded homunculi doing gymnastics and old guy at a singles mixer.exe robo dances. And with every new update comes a flood of alarmist reactions on social media, some ironic and some the complete opposite of ironic. The most recent of these updates involved an adorable little robo-dog designed by Ghost Dynamics with a soul-targeting robo-cannon strapped to its back that looks like it is designed to ghost bust you while you are still alive. The wave of responses on the Fearhog and the Terror Bird treated these videos like a doom prophecy, sharing them alongside images of murderous robots from popular culture, including RoboCop, RoboCop's neighbor, This Guy, and the gun-wielding Roomba from the hit Tom Selleck cyber thriller Runaway. Countless full-throated shouts cursed us all as docile, stupid cows forever thinking these slaybots were cute. "We warned you," they cried. "We told you these things were built for war and you didn't listen, and now we're all going to die." Weird gender reveal party, but congratulations, it's a whatever gender apocalyptic red is. Let's all stifle our collective gasps for a moment. First of all, the robot Elon Musk showed off in a Party City Spider-Man costume to try and move more inventory during Toy outfit and tweeting, "The future is now." Just to recap, revolutionize travel. Remember how one of those things didn't happen and the other one was a huge embarrassing failure? Do you remember when he said there'd likely be 0 new coronavirus cases by the end of April 2020? Let's maybe not put too much faith in the DoorDash fuckboy 9000. We've been listening to incredibly optimistic predictions about its development for literal decades. According to it, how the hell are we going to program a tumbling robot to log onto the Terror Bird and have thoughts about Squid Game, or the clanking death in layman's terms, are certainly a thing, but we're still in the very early stages. The robot dogs currently being tested by the military are classified as semi-autonomous, meaning they still require a human operator. They're extremely fancy drones, because drones are what the military-industrial complex is currently buying. You know, the kinds of robots that regularly murder innocent civilians both accidentally and extremely on purpose. Odds are the first time you see that dog bot patrolling the streets with a particle cannon strapped to its back that looks capable of reaching back through time and murdering your ancestors with its hot plasmatic blast, it won't be doing so under its own volition. It's going to be driven by a cop. And that's what should terrify you. A robot uprising would be a fucking delight compared to who will actually be in control of these things. Because at least the robots wouldn't be a bunch of scared racists terrified of white genocide while pretending to overdose on mythical poison Halloween candy. I mean, unless we do the Twitter robot thing again. Bring on the Terminator universe is my point. Except Terminator Genesis, that movie was not good. Also, the real concern with a lot of these autonomous robots is that they're going to be used to harass homeless people. But we don't care about that, do we? So, is there really nothing in the news we need to be afraid of? I mean, of course there is. Drones, I just mentioned that. One of the two major political parties in this country backing a weird, dumb coup over which anyone responsible has yet to face any actual consequences, not even from the other political party that seems generally disinterested in leading. The fact that birth rates and not fertility are on the decline because it's simply too expensive for people to exist. And oh yeah, an historic pandemic that's still killing thousands of people a day because our leaders have turned a public health issue into a bad faith ideological war. And granted, none of that stuff should leave you paralyzed in terror. And anyone who tries to take your clicks or money framing it that way doesn't deserve your time. But those very real concerns are hidden within these bullshit spook tales designed to maximize our dread to the point where we're reduced to trembling shells of our former glory, hunched over our phones and computer screens, smashing that like button to make sure we're kept abreast of the latest cataclysmic threat to our existence. It's exhausting. And it turns us all into ghouls, mindlessly doom-scrolling to feed off the hypothetical annihilation that both the fear hog and terror bird assure us is waiting around every corner. And most importantly, it's by design that these companies nurture this fear, because as we're learning, it's what gets them the most profit. You know how that first story about razor blades and Halloween candy took hold? It was a narrative pushed by candy companies based on basically zero evidence, urging people to buy their safely wrapped products rather than allow their children to accept homemade treats made by strangers. And while there's no evidence that candy companies invented the idea of tampered Halloween candy, because after all, they don't want parents to be afraid to let their kids go trick-or-treating during one of their most profitable times of the year, they definitely saw an opportunity to hijack that hysteria and turn it into a crusade against unwrapped treats specifically. And now that false narrative has become the unvarnished truth, to the point where the FDA and local governments have adopted the National Confectioners Association's list of safety guidelines that recommend only allowing your kids to eat prepackaged candy almost verbatim. Fear is a good grift, and it's the same reason these hyperbolic stories about microwave lasers, dangerous street drugs, and dwindling white populations circulate every single year with very little basis in fact. It's designed to sell us something, and in the case of these fear-mongering stories swapped on the terror bird and the fear hog like phobia trading cards, what's being sold is our attention. They want to keep us watching and reading and clicking, generating those delicious ad dollars by any means necessary. And in some cases, that fear can cause physical harm if it doesn't turn you into a monster. And in a lot of ways, doing news dressed as Frankenstein's monster is a very apt representation for what the news and social media, Dr. Frankenstein, wants to do to us. I wonder if I wore this on purpose for that thematic purpose. No, I wore it for a personal injury lawsuit I have later today, so don't tell anyone I'm not actually hurt. Russian space laser zapped here. And now I'm green! Ah! Happy Halloween and so forth.
Hello, thank you for watching. Some more news, like and subscribe!
Spooky voice. Check out our patreon.com/somemorenews. We've got a podcast called Even More News, where all podcasts are. This show is in podcast form in the same places that is. We've got merch with fucking Warmbo on it, and we've got a new show called Some This that you can check out with some, there's a fucking button somewhere. I don't know, check the description. And furthermore, that's the end of this. Ah!